Just a quick Christmas tip. You've got your coffee and you've got a ton of leftover eggnog. So instead of creamer, look at that. That's the stuff. Focus. So, this is my old motherboard. It is an ATX, exactly the ATX side, full ATX length motherboard. And you'd be surprised how many of these cases will not fit an ATX motherboard. This is like 75% ATX or whatever they call it. This is my girlfriend's old computer. I said, hey, let me give her my old motherboard. So I took her motherboard out and tried to put that one in, and it doesn't fit. This case isn't long enough. So I have some body work that I'm going to be doing at some point because my 1970 Cougar that I bought turns out had a pretty significant dent. It's all wrinkled underneath, tons and tons of Bondo. So having started to strip that out and see how bad it was, because I saw that there was a hole here, I just started working my way back, and this Bondo goes all the way down. So I need to weld a new panel in here or do something with it. And I bought the $99, $119 whatever Harbor Freight welder. It's flux core only. It's the cheapest welder you can get pretty much. And I needed to find out how well it does on sheet metal. You know, I knew that it would be more difficult to use because it's a flux core welder instead of a welder that uses gas, you know, an actual MIG welder that uses gas. So I said, hey, why don't I attempt to make a computer case, weld it together. So here it is. My girlfriend has a horse, so I borrowed an old horseshoe from her and welded it on the front. It isn't centered on this, but something covers that up, the power button and whatnot. So what I basically did, hold on, let me put the camera down for a second. I had yet another one of these cases that was too small for my old motherboard. I replaced the motherboard and various other components of my computer. I needed an upgrade. It had been like 6 or 7 years since I'd done it. So basically what I did was the other computer case, these internals, this part up here, this part here, and this drive cage are this backing plate for the motherboard. These all came out of another computer that I chopped up so that I could stick this motherboard inside it temporarily and still have access to that OS, that bootable computer, my old computer, because I replaced the SSD as well. You know, so that I could still have access to it while I made sure that I transferred all my files. It's very important to me. So what I did was I chopped up the old case, and this is the only part of it that there was. I put the motherboard in it, and I was able to run the computer, and the power supply up here. I was able to run the computer, you know, without a case, you know, open. So I called it Frankenstein for the brief period that he existed. And using a flux core welder is a bit of a mess, and because this one is so cheap, it only has one little setting on it, and I've discovered that it really isn't the best thing for doing sheet metal, because even on its lowest setting it'll blow holes through metal. So I managed to sort of cobble my way, to sort of stumble my way through making this case with it, but it was not very efficient or fun as it could have been if I'd actually had a real welder. Anyway, so what I basically did is I had a 4x4 sheet of 20 gauge steel, and I put this tray down on top of it, and then put the motherboard on the tray and made some measurements, and actually measured the outside perimeter first. And it turns out, well, actually it's from here to here to here to here. I measured that, and it was going to be like 44 inches or something like that. And we have a 48-inch sheet of plywood, so that's just a matter of cutting a strip off of it that is 8 inches wide. I measured how wide I wanted to make the case. So I cut that off of there, and then I proceeded to bend the metal. I believe I started with this small lip here, and the way that I did that was, if basically to bend metal, if you want to do it mechanically, it basically means that you're going to bend it over or with or sandwich between other metal, but that other metal just needs to be thicker, significantly thicker. So I had some parts for the Cougar left over, so I grabbed 2 of these. I clamped the sheet metal in here, put the other piece on top of it, clamped it, and then just used a body hammer to bring that lip up slowly, you know. And then being very careful with measurements. So I did one there, and then I did another bend here, and then I did another bend here, and then finally another bend here. It's actually underneath this panel here, but another bend here. And that worked out pretty well. As it turns out, the bend that I did here wasn't quite long enough, so the motherboard is a little tighter than I really wanted it. And basically the holes wouldn't line up. The motherboard needed to come down this way, so I did a little pounding on here. I split the seam just a little bit, but this is not going to be necessarily a pretty case. This is going to be, you know, an industrial looking steampunk whatever. And you can see it's getting there. It's almost there. Then it became the arduous task of, I had another piece of sheet metal that was in the shape of an L. So I used it to fill in this area here. And then of course I cut a piece for this side, and this is where the welding started. Yeah, that's where I actually started the welding, and then I finished up with this piece here. And then when I was done, I was like, hey, what do you know? I just actually kind of made a case. But it's just surprising to me how many cases are made today. If you go on Amazon under PC cases, the high percentage and how many pages you're going to have to scroll down to find a case that actually has drive openings on the front. Because apparently, I mean, it's true, I rarely ever use my optical drive, but when I do, I need it. So, and my girlfriend likes optical drives. She has a bunch of optical media, so I needed to cut a hole. I'm just glad I kept as much as I did of the drive cage, and I'm sorry that I didn't keep more, because I'd cut this panel off and I had to weld this on to hold the drive. I welded the back panel on, so I don't have access to the other side, to the screws on the other side of the drives. And that's okay here because I have access here, but I had to create something here to actually screw the drives in. So the drives go in here and they're screwed on one side, but they fit quite tightly because I slightly undercut the holes and then filed them out to make sure that it would have a nice seam around it. And it worked. So anyway, but it was quite time consuming to cut all the holes. Here's a hole I did for a couple of USB 3.0 ports. The reason why there's a 3.5 inch is to give access for this, a card reader. So, I mean, all cases need at least an SD card reader, right? So, and that's a multi-card reader fit into a 3.5 inch. And I have the 3.5 inch bay in here. So I'm basically going to take my old SSD and put it in here, and my girlfriend's old hard drive out of her old computer, so she still has access to her files, and an optical drive. And then the button from Frankenstein. It's actually kind of cool. This is a whole a kind of assembly that has just the motherboard connector on the end, you know, for the activity LEDs and power switch and stuff. And then it has this. So I'm just gonna, that's why I cut this hole. So this lines up like that. This slot is a little bit offset, but it goes right in like that. So not bad. And yeah. So then when I was done, oh, and I had to come up with some sort of mechanism for opening up the side, and I'm not really super impressed with what I did, but I created lips on the case and lips here. So the staggered lips on the case in there, and then I created these little pieces here with a hole in them to screw it closed. There's one in the middle, because I did the two on the bottom, and I did it on the top, and then I found out the middle kind of sticks out, so I added one in the middle. And you can see I welded them in, and you know, the welds are they're just crap. You know, they're ugly, but I was so concerned about blowing a hole through the metal at this point that I just like held the welder on there for just like 1 second, so that I would never blow a hole through it. But it made for some ugly welds, and you know, but you know what, it's most of the welds are hidden except for these ones here, which, you know, and I'm going to keep this. Basically I've already finished this on the outside. So when I was done doing all that, I just took some sandpaper and I sanded all the corners off so that they wouldn't cut people's hands open, and then I sanded all the surfaces, and then I painted it with just some clear coat lacquer that supposedly works on metal. And I put 2 coats on it, and I'll probably do 1 or 2 more depending. And it takes 24 hours to fully cure. The nice part about that stuff is that you can recoat it any time. You don't have to wait. You don't have to do it in the first 20 minutes. You don't have to do it in the first 2 hours. You don't have to wait more than 24 hours or whatever. So, and I painted this last night, and I've had this little terrarium heater running on it because it's a little chilly in the garage here. But I'm going to go ahead and finish the cabinet. I have to add bottom feet. They're on order. I still have them, but that's not going to affect the aesthetics. That's just, you know, so that it sits, so it doesn't sit metal on whatever on your floor or whatever. I'm going to finishing the case, and then when I get it further along, I'll turn the camera back on. I've done a few coats. Having this heat lamp really helps dry it faster. It's winter time. It's a little chilly. For some reason, I think what happened is I didn't properly clean the case first. Normally you want to acetone the case. I think that I acetoned a few of the sides, but not all of them. So the ones that I didn't do came out a little, you know, a little porous, let's say. But that was easily fixable. This is 600 grit sandpaper, a little more than what I need. However, if you wet sand it, just dunk that in water, it makes it less than 600, basically, effectively, and you can do less scratches in it. So I did that a little bit, and then sprayed it again, because when you do that, it does put scratches on there, but the minute you spray it, it's gone because you're scratching the finish that you put on. And then when you put another coat on top of it, that disappears. So we are almost done here, almost ready to assemble. Here's my dumb calculation that I used to calculate how long of a piece I would need to go all the way around. 3 sides, the bottom, the front, and the top. And yeah, it came out to 50, but that's with giving a few extra inches, and turns out 48 was pretty much perfect. So we're ready to start putting this thing together. The fasteners that came off that, what is it, HP? Yeah, HP case. You know, you could use a flathead on them, or it's actually a Torx in there. I don't know what size of Torx it is. Small, how about that? It says it on this thing somewhere here. T15. I don't know, whatever. So I just wanted to use these fasteners. They looked better. You know, I didn't really. So here's the deal. This is the panel that comes off, but I put 3 matching fake screws, you know, that don't serve any purpose, to match the 3 on this side. The only thing that is asymmetrical is I only welded on this side. I didn't weld it on this side. Same with the top, and on the bottom it's only welded on one side. But you know, hey, I don't want to burn holes through this. Otherwise I would probably just do a couple of welds, appearance welds, you know, just, but whatever, it's fine. So let's open this up. I think I'm going to start with, well, putting the motherboard in. I have an actual stand for my phone. I'm using my phone. I normally don't use my phone. I normally use my Canon prosumer single lens reflex camera. It's like a D60 or a 60D. So anyway, I need the panel to go in there first. Like that. So again, this piece right here, this whole piece right here, still attached to this piece. I never, you know, drilled out the rivets. I think maybe I need to wipe this down a little bit. I blew it out with compressed air. But anyway, so this made the job a lot easier to have part of a case, at least the framework. Where, I mean, if I had to make this and make all the holes and put standoffs and then make something like this with all this business, all this busyness, you know. So if you ever do a do-it-yourself case, use another junk case and your life will be a lot easier. Okay, so I just wiped out the inside with acetone. Could have used just about anything. Now, there is always what you want to be concerned about when you're doing a build of any PC, even if you have a case already, is cooling. So my girlfriend doesn't require a lot of horsepower. This motherboard obviously will take a PCI Express 16 graphics card, but I'm not going to install one at the moment unless she comes back. But she never plays games on it or anything. She just does basic scanning and printing and web browsing and stuff. So the amount of cooling this case is going to need is pretty minimal. But normally most cases are designed to suck air in from the front with a fan or passively, and have a fan on the back or passively, you know, one or the other or both fans, to push air back out. And then the fan in the power supply does a similar thing. I think it depends on the power supply, but the one I have, I'm fairly certain, sucks air from inside the case and exits it out. It's got actually 2 fans. I'm giving her a nice power supply that I've replaced the fan on the fan here was noisy. This is an Ultra Xfinity. Looks nice, very pretty finish on it. It's not very high end because it doesn't have detachable or pluggable modular cables. But anyway, I've replaced the fan in that, and it works well now. I also made sure that the capacitors weren't swollen or anything. Just a visual inspection, but it should be fine. So now I'm going to drop the motherboard in here, and I plan to put one single 60mm fan in here to push out. And you know, this case has enough, actually every case has enough gaps in it almost, in most cases, to have one fan, to allow for an intake of air that one single fan pushes out of the case. Just, you know, there's gaps around the drives, there's gaps in the panels, there's gaps everywhere. And this case, of course, is no exception. In this case, pun again. But anyway, so I'm not going to worry about any other, ventilation. I thought about putting holes within this horseshoe, but it's not necessary. This case is going to have plenty on, and then this panel here is full of holes. So, but if things are fairly well sealed, usually you can put a port on the front or even a fan on the front if you want to make sure that that's where the air is coming from. And I like to do on my cases where there is like a paper filter in front of the fan, or some kind of washable or filter that blows out or washes out or whatever, just because it decreases the amount of gunk, dust bunnies and stuff that collect inside the case tremendously. My primary case that I use for my computer is a name brand. I forget what brand it is, but it actually has, you take the front and it has a hinge, and you can open up the front, and there are two filters that you can just unclip and blow out. And it really, that's a lot easier than taking the whole case out and blowing it out, with compressed air or whatever. All right, so I'm going to drop the motherboard in here. Just thought I'd point out, I haven't screwed it in yet. I'm right up against the case there. There's nothing conductive on the edge of, well, any PCB that I can think of, unless it's intended to be that way. So touching the metal on this edge is fine, because the case is obviously going to be grounded, in particular from the motherboard and from the power supply, just from a physical connection. But yeah, that was so close. In fact, it was too close. It was the holes for the motherboard mounts weren't lining up, and now they are, but they were more like this or whatever. And I took my body hammer and just kind of tapped it a few times. And then when I did that, the bottom of the case is now a little, if you set the case, basically this end of the case sits a little bit lower. So when it comes to putting the feet on, I'm probably going to have to shave. This is a temporary foot. I only had 3 feet at the moment. But I'm probably going to have to shave one or both of the bottom feet a little bit. Either shave them down, or I could almost use heat and just kind of squish them. But yeah, so let me screw this in and we'll get to the next step. I always wait to tighten the screws down all the way. I just get them threaded in there. This motherboard tray is still not long enough for this motherboard. So this motherboard, geez, you know what? It just seems like I want to put some standoffs there. Going to need quite a standoff to do that. So yeah, challenge number 1. It's not as much of an issue because I'm not going to populate any of these ports except for maybe the first one. This motherboard doesn't have Wi-Fi on it. My girlfriend needs a Wi-Fi connection, so I have a little PCI 1X card to go in here with a couple of those antennas that stick out the back. and I'm going to put that in there. And a video card is right here, so that, but you know what, so from here, these two screws all the way back, it's not supported in any way, and I really, you know, it's bothering me. But I think really the best solution would be to get a couple of standoffs put in here. And I'm not even going to bother to fasten them to the case. I'm just trying to bring the height of this motherboard up a little bit and ensure that it doesn't get pushed down, well, basically when you insert a card or whatever. Yeah, because I mean, you think about it, the motherboard's fastened here and here, and that's it. Which is fine for a little person, you know, little computer, internet computer, whatever. It just bothers me that the motherboard actually kind of feels like it's kind of leaning down toward that, and I'm just going to do something about that. Use a caliper here. I don't know if I'm going to get a good measurement. I got a measurement to the top of the motherboard. I like millimeters because they're easier to count. So that's 14.5 millimeters. Yeah, 14.5 millimeters. Where the 0 is, see? 14.5 millimeters, and then we just want to subtract the thickness of the board, which is 1 millimeter. So 13.5 millimeters. I need standoffs that are 13.5 millimeters that a standard PC screw will thread into. So I think I'm just going to go ahead and whip up a couple on my 3D printer and do that. 13.5, yeah. I'll measure one more time. Measure twice, cut once, yeah. Measure twice, make once. Measure twice, 3D print once. Measure. Yeah. Yay! A tripod for my phone came in the mail. Alright, so here are the standoffs, and they hopefully are the right size. I'm not going to be able to reach it, so I'm going to put them in with the motherboard attached. Frankly, I've never done anything like this before, so I'm not in the habit of filming things that I've never done before because there's always going to be fails. Plus, I mean, I was all over the place. I was at the welder, then I was at the one of two workbenches that I have set up. It was somewhat of a chaotic couple of days because I've got other tasks that I need to do. Okay, looks pretty good. By the way, the tripod that I got, and they all seem to come with a wireless remote. I'm not sure if I'll ever use that. Fugit Tech. Okay, so we've got this thing for the front of the case. And we have a header somewhere on the motherboard for that. Yeah, that's the way to do it right there. And this can hop over, plug into the motherboard. So we're good there. Just thinking if I can get my mitts in there to get that. Looks like the power goes in first. Okay. Well, you guys have seen plenty of assembly. I'm going to skip ahead to... Look at that mess, huh? It's not so bad when you take a direct look over. I just kind of moved. The cables are going to all be over this way, pretty much. I'll tell you what, though, the RAM and that hard drive, the power connector for the hard drive and the RAM are kind of squished a little bit. Not horribly. And then all the extra cables are going to go there, trying to leave enough space around this fan so that it can operate properly. We've got the chassis fan there. Plug it in. That's a tight. It's pretty tight there. We got our Wi-Fi module here, and the only thing is that now that I've modified this case, there's a nice easy clip that holds in all of the PCI cards at the same time. And the only thing is that I have a lip here, and now this doesn't fit, so I'm going to have to trim the top of this off and hope that that goes in there. You can see these little clips go into these two holes, hopefully. So I'm going to do that. Okay, trimmed up. Need to, there we go, got it. See, that's, I mean, it would be better to put a screw in there. See how loose that is? It's not going anywhere, but still. So yeah, here's our Wi-Fi card. So what do we have left? Oh, another thing I did was I bought a, basically this is a USB 3.0 connector, double connector, and it came with a bracket to go where the expansion cards go, but I removed the bracket with the screws and reused the screws and simply cut some holes. So this is a fully USB 3.0 because this multi-card reader is actually running on 2.0. It's the one that I just had laying around. It's almost time for the scary part where we turn it on for the first time. I don't think there's anything else I was going to put in there. So yeah, hopefully there's nothing shorted out or whatever. I mean, I don't think that would be the case. If anything, there's a piece of small metal stuck in somewhere. I blew this out really good, and the case too, and then I wiped the case out. And when you're working with metal, I mean, the metal shavings get everywhere. But yeah, all right. I would like to just test it here before I bring it inside. So I'm going to go get my keyboard, mouse, and monitor. Okay, moment of truth. Alrighty. So far so good. Yeah, everything seems to be working. I guess I was mistaken about the hard drive LEDs. Like, I thought these two, but there's an LED above there, but what are these? What are those anyway? I don't know. Oh, that's not good. I wonder if it's I wonder which drive it's trying to boot from. Delete F2. Okay, let's see. All right, boot priority. SSD, the hard drive's not even in there. Maybe the hard drive isn't SATA 6G compatible. Well, that looks better. I guess maybe that was it. I don't know. Let's see. Yeah, it's going through its stuff. Yeah. Okay, so let's see what's going on with the hard drive. Let's see if we have it working here. System D. Yeah, there it is. Awesome. All right, anyway, so let me button it back up. All right, well, that's it. I'm pretty satisfied with the result. Things still need to be fully tested, but pretty sure we're going to be good to go. I need to fix that. I think this needs to be spun the other way. Anyway, that's it, and thanks for watching. Happy New Year.